My name is My name is Lakshmi Rajagopalan. I'm a planner with the City of Oakland Planning and Building Department. And today I have with me several of my team members, and I will call on them to introduce themselves. But before I do, this workshop is on Zoom, and we will be recording it and posting the presentation and the recording on the project website. Laura, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for attending. My name is Laura Kaminsky. I'm the Strategic Planning Manager.
Alicia? Alicia Gaylord? Okay, let's move on to Caleb Smith.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Caleb Smith, a Senior Policy Analyst for the City of Oakland Housing Community Development Department. Me and our Deputy Director, Ali Gaylord, are here just in case there's any questions that come up that touch on us. The planning and building is leading tonight's workshop. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Sally?
Hello, Sally Nielsen with House Rath Economics Group, and we are consulting with the city on this affordable housing strategy study.
Linda?
Hello, Linda House Rath Economics Group. Along with Sally, we are consultants on this project with the city.
And Stephanie?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Stephanie Skelton. I'm the Public Service Representative for the Strategic Planning Department, and I'm helping take notes. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you. So today's meeting, as I explained, is on Zoom. So we have a few ground rules. Everybody will be muted, so please mute yourself if you're not actively speaking, and make sure that we are being respectful and not using any inappropriate language or behavior. So the purpose of today's meeting is to provide background and to set the context on affordable housing pathways. Staff scheduled this workshop at the request from the community during the housing element process and also the zoning code update process. We've received several requests to set the context and provide some background on affordable housing pathways, specifically inclusionary programs that require affordable units on site, and affordable housing impact fee program that the city has. So this evening, we are hoping to provide some context and background on the framework for affordable housing production, an overview of the city's affordable housing impact fee program, define inclusionary housing, and examine the legal and policy context for the affordable housing impact fee versus inclusionary housing program requirements. In addition to that, this education and background information, we also want to hear from you if you have any thoughts or concerns and answer any questions that you may have. So for today's meeting, we will be using the Q&A feature that you see at the bottom of your screen. So you can post questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your toolbar. And if you have any questions that participants have posted that you like, you can upvote it using the thumbs up icon. And staff will try to answer as many questions as possible live. But we will also have a short amount of time at the end of the presentations to take verbal questions and other feedback. And for verbal questions, we will be please use the raise hand feature to indicate your interest in speaking, and the host will call on you. And for questions that we are unable to get to today or answer, we will respond to it as part of the notes that we will be publishing after this presentation. So moving into the background, we all know that we need more affordable housing in the city of Oakland. And the city's 2023-2031 housing element, which was adopted on January 31st, 2023, lays out several programs and actions that the city can take to build more affordable housing. And several of these actions that are shown in the screen below call for building more mixed income housing throughout the city to lessen geographic inequities, racial segregation, and housing disparities. In particular, Action 3.3.7 of the housing element directs the city to evaluate and consider an inclusionary housing requirement as part of its affordable housing strategy as compared to the city's existing affordable housing impact fee program, which is why we are here today. Now, I would like to turn it over to Sally Nielsen to walk us through the background and provide an overview. Sally?
Thank you, Lakshmi. Good evening. It's amazing that there are so many people registered for this workshop. I hope you come away from this presentation, with some useful information and food for thought about what is admittedly a complicated and somewhat arcane and frankly a bit wonky set of topics. So let's get started. This first slide here shows some facts and figures about 100% affordable housing production in Oakland, which is one of two means by which affordable housing is produced in the city. This is the primary means, but mixed income housing is the secondary source of affordable housing in the city. The information in this slide comes from the Department of Housing and Community Development's 2023 to 2027 Strategic Action Plan. Note that the affordable housing that we're talking about in this slide is produced by not-for-profit housing developers. These are entities that design and entitle the projects, assemble the funding packages, and compete for local funding in Oakland to bring these affordable units into the community. Based on data that the department has assembled, the average total cost to produce a unit of affordable housing in these 100% affordable housing projects is at $800,000 per unit. The average city capital subsidy that goes into these projects is $150,000 per unit. That's less than 20% of the total cost. This means that other sources of state, federal, and equity investment, usually tied to low-income housing tax credits, are required to complete these projects. Most of the projects involve packaging 5 or more funding sources. Examples of non-city funding include the Federal Home Loan Bank Affordable Housing Program. There's multiple sources in the state administered by the Housing and Community Development Department, the Multifamily Housing Program, infill infrastructure grants, the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Funding, and more recently, the California Housing Accelerator Fund. These 100% affordable projects typically take 3 to 4 years to complete on average after they receive funding, which can also be a long process. The city awards funding, the local funding, the city's share of this funding, the $150,000 per unit, on a competitive basis. They issue what's called a NOFA, a Notice of Funding Availability. And the current scoring for the funding prioritizes projects that are with more dedicated permanently supportive housing to formerly homeless individuals and extremely low income units. These are units targeted to alleviating homelessness, to neighborhoods experiencing displacement, and to emerging developers. One other aspect of subsidizing this type of affordable housing is that the cost for necessary supportive services for permanently supportive housing. It's estimated to be an additional $200,000 per unit for 15 years. And the annual subsidy has to be assembled from multiple sources, including city operating funds. And the Strategic Action Plan actually identifies the lack of funding for this operating subsidy as a constraint on the number of these types of deeply affordable units that can be produced. Next slide, please. The next 2 slides describe Oakland's local funding sources for 100% affordable housing. This is the funding administered through the NOFA process by HCD. The largest source by far is bond funding, and this is non-recurring funding that is dependent on periodic bond measures that have to be approved by the voters. Over the last few years that we've been through, most recently, we had Measure KK, in Oakland that provided $100 million towards 100% affordable housing production in Oakland. That money has been entirely spent. At the same time, we had almost $90 million from Alameda County Measure A1 that has also been fully spent to produce the 100% affordable housing in the city over the last few years. Most recently, there is new bond funding through Measure U, a substantially larger amount, $350 million, and that's beginning to be allocated for future projects. The current strategic action plan notes that Measure U is going to provide 70% of the total funding for the almost 3,000 units projected to be built during that strategic plan time horizon. Next slide. The second source of local funding for 100% affordable housing production in Oakland is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And though it's a smaller amount of money in total to the bond funds, it's actually an important ongoing local source of capital funding. While it's dependent on city council policy decisions, it is not dependent on voter approval. The revenue that goes into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund comes from several sources. One of those is the Affordable Housing Impact Fee. Since the fee was first implemented in September 2016 through this most recent fiscal year end in June of 2023, the trust fund received almost $28 million of affordable housing impact fee revenue that was paid by the developers of market rate residential development. Actually, another $62 million of impact fee revenue is outstanding from those developers of private market rate housing because they pay their impact fee payments in different stages depending on the status of their development project. The trust fund also collects money from the jobs housing impact fee and also receives the boomerang funds, the 25% allocation of former redevelopment tax increment money that the city council has set aside to fund affordable housing in the city. Through this trust, I'm not quite ready to go back. Where we are, boomerang, yeah. Through the trust fund, the impact fee revenue and the boomerang funds are used to leverage the other federal, state, and county sources that I mentioned earlier to produce more affordable units. It's these city funds that partially fill the gap between development costs for 100% affordable housing and the funding available from the other sources. And this local funding commitment is often a critical component of securing all of those additional other funding sources. Okay, now we can move forward. Let's see. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the two components of affordable housing production in Oakland. We first have these not-for-profit housing developers with city support produce the 100% affordable housing, what I've just been talking about with all the funding sources. And there are also some 100% affordable projects that are included in larger project areas that have been subject to development agreements and are not subject to impact fees, but the development agreements specify a certain component of affordable housing. The second component is the private market rate housing developers. And it is through, and the private market rate housing developer sector contributes towards affordable housing in Oakland in two ways. This is one way is to produce mixed income projects where affordable housing is included along with market rate housing in a development project. And this is when affordable units are provided on site, either instead of paying the affordable housing impact fee or also to satisfy requirements of the density bonus ordinance that I will be discussing in more detail later. And it's this second group, the private market rate housing developers, that's the focus of this housing strategy policy discussion. Although the first group, as we've discussed, benefits from the impact fees that are paid by private market rate development. Next slide. Okay, before we go further, this slide defines some of the terms used in discussing affordable housing production and the households that are eligible for affordable housing units. Units are made available to households in various income categories, all of which are defined relative to area median income, which in this case in Oakland is Alameda County median income. That number is adjusted every year by the state. Median income varies by household size. The example shown on the slide is for a family of 3 in 2023 of $133,000 of household income. The comparable amount for a single person household in 2023 is just over $100,000. Extremely low income households, those with 30% or less of area median income, are the households given priority by 100% affordable housing projects. In mixed income projects, the most deeply affordable units required are for very low income households, those in the category between 31 and 50% of area median income, and then up into low and moderate income categories. So the income categories define the mix of households that can occupy 100% affordable housing projects, and the rents and prices for affordable units in mixed income projects. Project sponsors for both types of affordable housing must report annually on the household incomes, and the units are monitored by the city's HCD department. Next slide, please. Here's some background on recent affordable housing production in Oakland as measured by units permitted during the most recent 8-year period, 2015 through 2022. Almost 2,500 units were permitted. This includes both 100% affordable projects as well as units in mixed income projects. By far, the majority of the units are in 100% affordable projects. It's interesting to note that more than half, 60% of the units are affordable to very low income households, which includes that lowest category of extremely low income households. Next slide. These next couple of slides take a closer look at the 100% affordable housing projects that are actually funded in part by affordable housing impact fee revenue that is provided by the developers of private market rate housing development. It's a small subset of all of the 100% affordable housing projects. According to the most recent annual impact fee report for 2023 fiscal year, Oakland has collected almost $28 million in affordable housing impact fee revenue from developers of market rate housing since the fee was first imposed in September of 2016 through June of 2023. Of that amount, the city has awarded most of it, $25 million, to 9 projects of 100% affordable housing that provide 565 affordable housing units. More than half of the units are deeply affordable to extremely low income households at less than 30% of area median income, and another 33% are affordable to very low income households. And remember again that many other sources of public funding, local, state, and federal, and other equity are required to develop these projects. Next slide. Here's some specific examples. Oakland has bundled the affordable housing impact fee revenue to produce a number of projects. 7th and Campbell and Longfellow Corner are 2 projects that were partly funded by these affordable housing impact fees. The 2 projects are currently under construction. They have a large portion of their units dedicated to extremely low income households earning at or below 30% of area median income. Next slide. 2 other examples of projects that were partly funded by affordable housing impact fees are Friendship Senior Housing and Nova Apartments. Friendship Senior Housing is under construction. Nova Apartments, which is already currently in operation, is deeply affordable, entirely dedicated to permanently supportive housing for the formerly homeless. And impact fees were helpful at not just directly paying for these projects, but making these projects more competitive for state and federal affordable housing funding. Next slide. Now we're going to take a closer look at the role of the private sector market rate development in affordable housing production in Oakland. I mentioned earlier, there are some larger projects that have development agreements, complicated development agreements negotiated over a number of years for projects with multiple buildings and hundreds of units. And some of these development agreements call for substantial numbers of affordable units. Examples of such projects would be Brooklyn Basin, Oak Knoll, BART Station area development plans at MacArthur, West Oakland, and Lake Merritt. The focus of this affordable housing strategy work effort is two other avenues for the role of market rate development in affordable housing production: impact fees and on-site affordable units. The affordable housing impact fees paid by private developers based on market rate housing in a development project generate revenue for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund that funds 100% affordable housing projects, as we've discussed in the prior slides. The other way that the private sector contributes is if they decide they don't want to pay the impact fee, but they will instead produce a mixed income project with affordable units on site. And these on-site units can not only satisfy their obligation under the affordable housing impact fee, but they may, if the developer so chooses, may also be entitled to density bonus incentives and concessions that can help enhance project feasibility in a mixed income development project. Next slide. Now we're going to shift to the policy and legal context for regulations on private development to contribute to affordable housing production. The public and private sector both have a role. We've talked about the public sector role in affordable housing production in Oakland, and now the focus is on the private sector role and local public regulatory options that have an influence on what decisions the private sector makes. There's a long history of public policy support for private development's role in affordable housing production. The rationale is the public interest in providing for housing needs of all economic segments of the community. Communities that provide housing across a broad range of household incomes are more diverse and economically integrated. And the source of these quotations is 1980 amendments to California's housing element law that find that the availability of housing across all economic segments is of statewide importance and requires the efforts of both public and private sectors. Next slide. There are two paths to generating affordable housing production, affordable housing from market rate development. Inclusionary programs, sometimes called inclusionary zoning, require market rate development to make some of the units in the market rate project affordable to low and moderate income households. The authority for these local land use regulatory requirements for on-site affordable housing is the local government police power, the same authority that allows local government to regulate the size and use of buildings and to require open space or parking, for example. Impact fees are the other path. And impact fees on market rate development projects generate money to fund affordable housing production elsewhere in the city. Affordable housing impact fees are assessed based on the rationale that market rate development should bear some of the cost burden of meeting a community's need for below market rate housing, particularly the demands that can be associated with new market rate housing. Affordable housing impact fees, like transportation, open space, and capital facilities impact fees, are governed in California by the Mitigation Fee Act. This requires a nexus analysis to document the relationship between market rate housing and the demand for affordable housing, to establish the associated mitigation costs and maximum legal fees, and justify the reasonable and proportional relationship between the fee amount and the new development subject to the fee. Against these maximums, cities set actual impact fee levels based on economic feasibility analysis and local policy priorities. Note that a nexus analysis is not required for inclusionary programs that require on-site affordable units, but these studies or similar studies are often done as part of the policy development process and to provide a basis for determining the in lieu fee amounts that are alternative compliance options for on-site requirements. Next slide. So we have two paths, but actually it's the same set of options. These two paths, inclusionary on-site programs and affordable housing impact fees, mirror each other, as I've tried to show in this slide. In both cases, there are alternative means of compliance, alternatives for satisfying the on-site requirement or the impact fee requirement. For inclusionary on-site programs, the most common compliance option is an in lieu fee. For affordable housing impact fees, the most common compliance option is providing affordable housing on-site. And both inclusionary on-site programs and affordable housing impact fees also often offer the option for off-site compliance. Next slide. Some discussion now of the legal context, which provides background for Oakland's current program. A series of court decisions starting in 2009 upended the design and practice of inclusionary on-site housing programs in California. Until that time, programs adopted in California requiring specified percentages of units in residential development to be affordable at below market rates with in lieu fees and other alternatives for compliance had applied to both rental housing and for sale housing. In the 2009 Palmer decision, the court found that the inclusionary requirement on rental housing violated state rent control law. So after this decision, cities had to redesign their on-site inclusionary programs for rental units and implement impact fee programs instead. This was the legal context that was in effect in 2015 and 2016, when Oakland developed the affordable housing impact fee as the preferred means of tapping market rate development for affordable housing production. Next slide. Now we'll have a few slides about the details of Oakland's current program, the Affordable Housing Impact Fee Program. The impact fee program went into effect in September of 2016, and key features of the program design include the following. The fee applies citywide. It is assessed on different fees are assessed on different types of residential development, single family, townhome, and multifamily development. There's no minimum size threshold. The fee applies to all new residential development, unless it is exempted because of various other reasons. The fees are assessed per unit and are differentiated among 3 impact fee zones that have different market characteristics influencing the economic feasibility of development and therefore the ability to pay impact fees. The fees were phased in initially in 2016, but then by July of 2020, fees in all 3 zones had reached the full value determined in the 2016 adoption. And then starting in 2021, the fee increases at the beginning of each fiscal year by the rate of construction cost inflation. In the 3 years since July 2021, impact fees have increased by a cumulative 35%. This is directly a result of the construction cost index. And because construction costs have been going up so much in the last few years, the annual increase in the fee has been significant. And using this construction cost index, the intent is to keep the fee current with the actual cost to build affordable units. so that you don't fall behind. Next slide, please. This table just details the current fee schedule, where you can see the differentiation by zone and housing type. The highest fees are in Zone 1, where the highest fees within Zone 1 then are for single-family units, followed by multifamily units and then townhome units. Zone 2 has fees in the middle of the range, and the lowest fees are in Zone 3. Next slide, please. As I've noted previously, there are options. So the developers of private market rate housing don't have to pay the impact fee. They have options for meeting their requirement in other ways. And the main one is producing units on site and thereby producing a mixed income development project. Excuse me. This table shows, this slide shows the requirements if the developer decides to build on-site affordable units in lieu of paying the impact fee. They can provide 5% of the total proposed units as affordable to very low income households. That's the category of 30 to 50% area median income. Or they can provide 10% affordable to low or moderate income households. There's opportunities for mixed compliance. If they provide fewer units, they can pay the balance due with impact fees. Including on-site affordable units at the percentages shown enables these developers to satisfy their affordable housing impact fee requirements, and they can also take advantage of density bonuses and incentives that are provided in Oakland's planning code that is based on the state density bonus program. Oakland's on-site option requirements are consistent with the minimum percentage of below market rate units required to qualify for a density bonus and associated incentives in each income category. Next slide. The legal authority for the on-site requirement on rental housing was changed significantly and fully restored in 2017. California adopted AB 1505, which was a clear reinstatement of the right of local jurisdictions to impose inclusionary requirements on rental housing, restoring the legal landscape prior to the 2009 Palmer decision. Notably, the bill also required alternative means of compliance, providing examples such as in lieu fees, offsite requirements, land dedication, and acquisition or rehabilitation of existing units. Next slide. Now we'll move into some issues related to development economics, which are key to understanding how these regulatory options might actually work. So state and local policies encourage mixed income housing production. Again, that's market rate projects with some on-site affordable units. An earlier slide outlined Oakland's new housing element policies to encourage development of mixed income housing. The most significant regulation affecting development economics is Oakland's density bonus ordinance, which is based on California's law. The density bonus program offers a broad array of incentives to encourage private developers to include below market rate units in their projects. Note the density bonus program also applies to 100% affordable projects, enabling more affordable units than would otherwise be the case, as well as concessions that help those nonprofit developers reduce project costs. For mixed income projects, the intent behind these density bonus policies is to harness the private market to produce affordable housing, thereby reducing the need for public subsidies. In addition to more market rate units than allowed under base zoning, the housing developer providing on-site affordable units is entitled to concessions and waivers from local development standards and requirements that would otherwise be applied. This reduces project costs across the entire building, enhancing project feasibility and offsetting the cost of making some of the units affordable to low and moderate income households. Studies have shown that density bonus incentives, concessions, and waivers have effectively boosted mixed income and 100% affordable housing production in Oakland and elsewhere in the state. Benefits of this type of mixed income housing are that affordable units are built at the same time as the market rate units and built in neighborhoods that might otherwise have affordable units built. Next slide. So development economics influence developer choices related to their choice to pay affordable housing impact fees or to provide on-site affordable units. And I'll highlight some of the distinctions from the perspective of the developer. The affordable housing impact fee is predictable. It's a published amount that developers incorporate it into their real estate pro forma, just like they estimate construction costs and the cost of permits and other fees. The developer knows when the fee is due. When they pay the fee, they have satisfied their obligation. This eliminates a lot of the uncertainty in the development process. On the other hand, when you include on-site affordable units in your market rate project, it's a much more complicated financial calculation and poses some implementation challenges to the developer that do not exist if the developer chooses to pay the affordable housing impact fee. First, since the affordable units are required to be generally of the same size and type as the market rate units and integrated throughout the project, affordable units cost the same to build as the market rate units. Because of this, the cost to the developer is typically measured as the difference in project income generated by units rented or sold at affordable levels compared to units rented or sold at market rates. At the same time, if a developer applies for the density bonus program, they're entitled to build more market rate units than otherwise allowed, which perhaps enhances project returns, and to take advantage of the regulatory concessions and waivers that can have significant impact of reducing project costs for the entire building. Next consideration for these developers is that affordable units are required to be deed restricted for 55 years or the life of the project and to be monitored annually. These are procedural and implementation considerations that add to costs that don't exist if a developer chooses to pay the affordable housing impact fee. Because of the complicated development economics and implementation hurdles, it's difficult to generalize about the equivalent cost of the affordable housing impact fee and the on-site option with the density bonus. Next slide. Analysis of Oakland's multifamily residential development pipeline indicates increases in the number of projects providing on-site affordable housing units and in the number of projects utilizing the density bonus program. These mixed income projects represent an increasing share of the number of projects and the units in projects proposed, permitted, and built. The reasons for these trends lie in development economics. In mixed income density bonus projects, developers offset the cost of providing the affordable units on site by either adding more market rate units than otherwise are allowed or taking advantage of the concessions and waivers. The number of concessions and waivers is tied to the number of affordable units and the depth of affordability. The ability to reduce or eliminate otherwise applicable development standards and requirements reduces overall project costs and can make a significant difference in enhancing project feasibility. On-site affordable units, such as those required under the density bonus ordinance, are an alternative means of satisfying the affordable housing impact fee obligation, as we've discussed, and developers weigh that against fee increases that are tied to the construction cost in index, which means those fees have increased significantly in the last few years. This is another part of the developer's cost calculation as to how to best meet Oakland's affordable housing requirements on private development. Finally, we will wrap up with this last slide. This presentation has provided some background context for Oakland's affordable housing strategy choices and has identified some key difference in the regulatory options. We'll close with some topics to consider as we refine Oakland's policies related to market rate development's role in affordable housing production. Private market versus public subsidy, particularly when public resources are constrained. The value of leveraging non-local public funding provided by the impact fee. Timing, how fast are units provided? The value of maximizing affordable housing production. The depth of affordability, the ability to meet the highest priority housing needs that the city has. What is a policy design that aligns with development economics of building types and locations? And consider the benefits of mixed income buildings versus 100% affordable buildings. And then the value of opportunities for lower income households to live in high resource neighborhoods where high land values prohibit development of 100% affordable housing, and also the value of opportunities for mixed income projects in neighborhoods that have concentrations of poverty. And with that, I'll wrap up the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. This is the link to the project website, and as I mentioned earlier, we will host this presentation and the recording on the project website, and soon thereafter, we will also post the project the meeting notes and a summary with key action items. And we will now move into the Q&A portion of it. So if you have some questions that you would like to be answered verbally, please use the raise hand options. And you can do that by going to in your toolbar, there is this reactions tab, and then you can raise hand from there. Or you can post your question in the Q&A section, and then we'll try to answer that for you, or we'll take it live. Okay, so maybe we'll go with the Q&A portion. So there was a question from Philip Patrick. His question asks, what would it take to divert funds from 100% of affordable housing developments to mixed income, given the advantages of mixed income housing over affordable housing developments?
I'm going to have to let someone from the Housing and Community Development Department answer that kind of process question.
Caleb or Ali?
Hi, this is Ali Gaylord. Could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. So the question is, what would it take to divert funds from 100% affordable housing developments to mixed income, given the advantages of mixed income housing over affordable housing developments?
Oh, well, I believe that's the question that we're analyzing right now. So it would be a policy question that is being examined based on the requirements of the housing element. So the policy would be have to be adopted in order to make that change.
Thank you. Laura, did you want to add anything, or we're good?
Well, I wasn't sure if I understood the question necessarily, because I wasn't sure if they were talking about actually taking money that's used for 100% affordable to actually be used in a mixed income building. So actually to help subsidize affordable units in a mixed income building. Or if they're talking about, which is I think what we're kind of discussing today, more about the policy choices of either collecting impact fees to then build 100% affordable, as opposed to an inclusionary requirement where the developer, instead of paying the fee, actually builds it on site. So I'm not sure if Philip could maybe
Clarify. Philip,
yes.
would you want to unmute yourself and?
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
you.
Yeah. So the question is more like kind of the former, I guess, with what you were saying. There's obviously, we have a concentration. I live in West Oakland. We have a concentration of 100% affordable housing developments, and there's obviously, a lot of benefits to having mixed income. The studies support that, and we haven't referenced any, but there are many. And so, I guess I'm wondering what it would take to start to look at taking the dollars that we have for affordable housing making sure that we get the same number of units, but it goes into mixed income development as opposed to 100% affordable housing development, where you don't have the same advantages that you have when you have mixed income.
I can't say. This is Allie Gaylord, Deputy Director of Housing for the Housing and Community Development Department. I can say that it would be very tough to generate the same number of affordable housing units within a market rate project, because the way that the financing for 100% affordable works is by leveraging many state and federal resources. So typically, local resources are leveraged about 7 to 1 or greater when using them to create affordable housing. So you would need 7 times as much money to get the same amount of affordable housing in a market rate project.
So that's you're saying that the money at the state level that would support affordable housing projects would go towards 100% affordable housing, more than and 7 times more than it would for mixed income housing. Is that what I'm hearing? Or
yeah, the low income housing tax credit finances affordable housing development, and that's not typically available for a mixed income project.
How do we change that? I mean, because
the federal
the state.
law.
Oh, that's federal. That's not state. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Caleb?
If I may, it sounds from what I understand, Philip, that your concern is actually about sort of the concentration of affordable housing, perhaps sort of an over-concentration concern. Did I sort of hear that correctly?
Well, so that's another concern, is that, the concentration of 100% affordable housing in one portion of the city, it seems, or certain portions of the city, but that's really a separate issue than what I'm really addressing now. Now what I'm addressing is that, I think clearly there are way more advantages to having low income tenants in a mixed income development, right? And so and disadvantages when there's 100% affordable housing development, right? I mean, we can cite case after case. So what would it take for us to get to where those dollars that are going towards 100% affordable housing go towards mixed income, right? And so it sounds like it would have to start. There would have to be something happening at the federal level. It sounds like at the state level there's a recognition of this advantage and wanting an encouragement to move in that direction, right? And now we're looking at doing that here at the city level, but it sounds like at the federal level there's still some convincing, or we have yet to move in that direction. Is that accurate? Or
Well, it might be worth noting that when we're talking about affordable housing, we're talking about a spectrum of incomes. So some of the affordable housing that the city funds is that really deep affordable housing for people who are formerly unhoused, for example. But typically when we fund affordable housing as part of the new construction, funding availability, like some of the buildings you saw earlier in the presentation, there's actually several different layers of affordable housing that are combined. So we are mixing incomes within a single building. And some of the higher income bands of affordable housing at what we call 80% of area median income, those are typically middle-class jobs like nurses, entry-level teachers, that kind of thing. So we are already getting some of that income mixing in a lot of the affordable housing we're doing.
Thank you, Caleb. So there is a raised hand from Pacific Metro. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I was curious that seems like the alternatives that are presented here are really just different tactics of providing the housing, and they're not really differences in strategy. And if we zoom out a bit, because we're zoomed in pretty close to this, we zoom out. Really, these two different tactics are both essentially just cross-subsidized by raising the cost of housing for everyone. That some folks have cheaper housing and have it subsidized. So my question is, does the city look at kind of a bigger zoomed out vision of how we should actually provide housing, and maybe making housing more expensive for everyone is not perhaps the best way to do it, or if there's other ways to do it, or other mechanisms to create housing with funds that don't necessarily inflate the local housing market costs for everyone else? That's really my question, because it just seems like we're very zoomed in on these two different tactics, but haven't looked at the big picture.
Well, I would say, I mean, as you probably saw in the presentation, there's a number of ways that the city does collect money for affordable housing. So if you actually see the largest amount of money is through the bonds that we've had recently. And those are done, through the voters approve those and are done through that process. So that's really, I think, the majority of the money that we are getting is through that process. But in addition, we do have, the impact fee program that we have now, which still allows for the on-site option. I think kind of to your point, really, and I think this is something we wanted to point out in this presentation, is that since we did hear through the housing element a lot of requests about, well, how come Oakland doesn't have an inclusionary zoning program that other cities have? One, we wanted to show sort of, there was, a reason why we did this, because of really the state law at the time did not allow us to have inclusionary zoning when we created our impact fees. And in addition, really most programs that have inclusionary also have an option of a in lieu fee payment. So in some ways, right now the way our program is, you can either pay the fee or you can build it on site. And inclusionary allows you to build it on site or often pay the fee. So they can be really similar. I think it's more about, I think the one requires a nexus study, the Mitigation Fee Act requirement, versus the other one is through police powers. I think there's still concern at some point that this, if there's another change in law or a lawsuit that happens, it sounds like my understanding is a lot of cities still do the nexus analysis because they want to have that backup in case something changes. So that often cities are still doing the nexus analysis regardless of whether they have the Mitigation Fee Act or they're doing the inclusionary. And I think the way Oakland did it, and we're still doing it now, is we're trying to look at the feasibility, where you are doing a feasibility analysis to look at anytime we do look at changing our fees or also potentially changing an on-site percentage. So we don't want to stop housing from being built, and that's a goal. That's something the state also wants to make sure when we do our program. So yeah, I think, and then in addition to what I think Sally was pointing out, there's a lot of, especially with the on-site and the way the state has set up our density bonus program, there's actually a lot of incentives to make it pencil out and be, a favorable thing to be building them on site as part of their project, because it's helping them really with their overall project. They're getting more units, they're getting concessions and waivers. And so we're talking about cost of housing. It actually isn't necessarily adding a cost at that point, which is why we're starting to see that trend of more projects are starting to take that as a way of meeting their compliance, is actually building it on site. And that's part of, I think, when we're talking about if there's a census from a policy standpoint of whether the city and community is preferring maybe more mixed income projects, than 100% affordable, then that also can be the way you set up your program, right? So if you allow developers to be taking advantages of these concessions and waivers, where maybe they are choosing that route of building on site as opposed to choosing to pay the fee. But I kind of think almost in whichever way we go, there's probably going to be always some developers that will pay the fee because they just don't want to deal with the hassles that I think Sally was talking about of having on-site affordable. They got to be monitored and all these other types of things. And there's other developers who also, you know, are local and think it's great to be providing affordable housing as part of their projects.
Right. I guess, but my question was really about, once again, kind of the subject of, is it the best policy overall, whatever tactic you use, whether it's inclusionary zoning, whether it's in lieu fees, you're still essentially, they're all cross subsidization schemes. And my understanding is you mentioned the bond revenues are a major funding, but aren't those bond revenues funded through properties? They're all based on property tax assessments. So essentially, it all comes back to cross subsidization schemes. And that's really my question is, like, do you ever zoom out and think like, wow, maybe if something's really expensive, we can look for other means to fund it rather than making it more expensive? You know, it's like the tide just keeps going up, you know? So that's my question.
Yeah, but I think, you know, if we look at the history of, you know, formerly we had the redevelopment, agencies and the redevelopment department from the state that actually funded a lot of, or a majority, if not of, our affordable housing in the city. And that was something obviously that the state took away, that money from the cities. But even in that process, that was tax money as well. I mean, the redevelopment monies were tax money that was collected from cities. So I think that's always been the case, is there's either kind of monies that are used from tax monies or from impact fees. And because the state took away that crucial form of funding, the cities have been having to try to find other ways to provide that affordable housing. Okay, we should probably go on. Do we want
So
Lakshmi?
yeah, I'm monitoring. So there is a question from Nishka Maheshwari, and it's for Sally. So her questions, so it sounds like the 2007 judgment made it illegal for jurisdictions to require on-site affordable units, and therefore the payment of in lieu fees is required as an option. If the 2017 judgment overturned that decision, is it now conceivable that jurisdictions could go back only to allowing on-site affordable units and no longer allowing in lieu units?
It wasn't a 2017 judgment. It was a legislative act by the state legislature. Let's see. I've lost the question now. Where is it? In any case, with either local policy sort of first choice, whether in Oakland the choice now is an impact fee, you have to offer some alternative means of compliance. And typically, the most common alternative means of compliance for an impact fee is the on-site option. And then the inverse goes when you have your inclusionary program with an on-site requirement, whereas that's the first thing that developers face. But then they also have an option of providing a fee in lieu at a select amount. And jurisdictions set up by the way they set the fees and the way they set the percentages of below market rate units required, they set up some incentives for doing one or the other, depending on what the local policy priority is.
Does that answer your question, Nishka? So there were a couple of questions about the percentage of market rate versus marketed housing projects that opt for on-site affordable units, and how many projects go with in lieu versus on-site. We are currently analyzing that, and that's going to be presented as part of the informational report to the councils. So we do not have those numbers yet. And I saw Casey had her hand raised, but she took it down. Casey, do you want to ask your question? Casey Kettering? Casey?
Maybe they had to leave. I don't know.
Okay. So there was a question about why does the city continue to upzone areas, high resource areas, without demanding increases in requiring on-site housing. So both of these are actions that came out. So I can take the first stab, and then Laura, if you want, you can add. So the actions that resulted in zoning changes and upzoning and height increasing changes in the high resource neighborhoods or in several areas across the city were also required by the housing element, similar to this action 3.3.7. So we are trying to encourage development of housing across all income levels throughout using a variety of strategies, and upzoning is one of those strategies. And the study that we are currently doing is another strategy.
Yeah, in addition, with the housing element, and this is actually, some of this was state law. So the state law required that any sites that we used in the housing element that we've used in our past housing element cycles, that if that developer were to build 20% affordable, then they would get a by right approval process. So that also is another way to incentivize in these high resource neighborhoods that of building a mixed income building, because if they build 20% affordable, then they will get a by right approval process, which often for a larger project, that could take 1 to 2 years, potentially even longer, involves an environmental impact report. So they also don't have to do environmental impact report either. So it can really save a lot of time and money for a developer. And then obviously they can also take advantage of the concessions and waivers and the density bonus as well. So there's a number of things to also incentivize a mixed income project being built in these areas.
Yeah, and we also wanted to just point out that Sally had in her presentation that the city has 3 impact fee zones, and impact fee zone 1 is the zone with the highest fees. And that is the high resource area. So those zones are already being charged a higher percentage of fees. Do we have any more questions? Okay, Casey. Casey, we can't hear you if you're speaking. Or did you want to put your question in the chat? Okay, while we're waiting for
I see there's a question from, I think it's Alyssa Dennis. So the commercial impact fee has not been resurrected in 20+ years. We're leaving a lot of potential resources on the table by not collecting enough and not collecting from all possible commercial development. The Nexus studies from 2021 indicated a lot of room to increase. What is the plan to explore how we can generate more revenues from these fees? So we currently have what is a jobs housing impact fee, which is a fee on office buildings and also warehouse buildings. And those fees have also been increasing with the construction cost index. We did evaluate that during the Nexus, because there was also, we are not currently charging a jobs housing impact fee on retail, on hotels, on industrial uses. There, were reasons for doing that before, and there may still continue to be reasons to do that in now. We are analyzing that as part of the economic feasibility process to see, is there potential for those type of uses to pay higher fees? Obviously, some of the concerns, like an example for an industrial use, if we're trying to get industrial uses to businesses to come to Oakland, and we want, a lot of those especially might be creating jobs that could be possible jobs for Oaklanders, and we're competing with other cities. If you end up, the potential, if we start increasing those fees, then we may potentially not get those types of businesses and those jobs for our community, as well as tax revenues. Similarly with retail, as you probably know, retail is not doing well right now. It wasn't doing well before the before COVID because of all the online shopping that's been happening, and certainly since COVID has gotten even worse. And with retail, we do get a lot of tax revenue from that. So again, certainly a concern that if we did increase impact fees on that type of use, then we may also get less of that use or than we already have at this time. So those are all things we have to consider when we look at, and especially if we wanted to even increase the fees, like on office, as we know, the office market is also not doing well at all right now. But that's something, again, that we're looking at with the economic feasibility analysis.
Are there any other questions? I don't see any more hands.
I do see Jeff put in the chat, I think kind of a statement, but also I think somewhat of a question of he's saying it's worth noting that the median income for Oakland renters who are the target for these programs, including first-time home buyer programs, is $60,000, which actually qualifies as very low income. Can inclusionary units meet the needs of the households that have the greatest needs for affordable housing? So, I mean, that's again, those some of the, I think, policy choices, right? And some of the pros and cons of the different types of whether you're paying the impact fees. I think we talked earlier that, with the impact fees, those monies can be leveraged to build, I think, more units than you would have built on site. But obviously then those units do take longer to build. But in addition, I think as to Jeff's pointing out, that those monies can be leveraged to build extremely low income affordable, which the mixed income projects that are inclusionary are not going to be building that type of housing because it does need an ongoing subsidy because the rents are so low in that instance. Jeff?
I would Laura,
ahead.
I'd also point out that we haven't completed all of the analysis, but the density bonus projects and the projects that do provide on-site affordable housing in lieu of paying the impact fee often do target those very low income units. Those are the most of the units seem to be in that lowest of the income categories. It doesn't get to the extremely low, but it's that first-time home buyer category.
If I could also just tack on to that, though, I do think that I don't think that those very low necessarily always need the ongoing subsidy. It's more like the extremely low and below that level. So the very low income is actually not constrained by the ongoing operating subsidy like the extremely low is.
Jeff, did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, well, the point I'm trying to make is that if we're going to be comparing these policy alternatives, we need to make sure that what we are doing is comparing apples to apples in terms of the outcomes that we get. So, when we look at the kinds of units that get built as inclusionary units on site, we need to be looking at how many units do we get from one approach versus the other? How deep is the affordability? And I want to come back to the very low income question. What size are the units? Most market rate housing is building studios 1s and 2s and isn't providing 3 and 4 bedroom units. That's often what's needed in the low income side. For the deepest incomes, there's a whole issue of providing supportive services, which is really unlikely to happen in a market rate project with inclusionary units. So I think we need to look at all of those things. We also need to note that when inclusionary projects or density bonus projects provide units, quote, as very low income, they are providing them at the very, very top of the scale. They're providing them at the maximum rents that they are allowed to provide and still count as very low income. The units that the city is directly subsidizing and 100% affordable are serving overwhelmingly a whole range from 30% of median up to 60%, plus a specific percentage targeted even lower. So I think we want to look very carefully at the outcomes and make sure that we are getting the same thing, or we're comparing the same thing when we're trying to make policy choices. And the only other thing I wanted to note is we should not conflate the goal of getting mixed income neighborhoods with thinking that that can only be achieved through mixed income buildings. We get mixed income communities also by having affordable housing projects side by side with market rate. The city has done this multiple times, especially in larger developments, whether that's Brooklyn Basin or Uptown or a number of other places. And frankly, the literature on the so-called benefits to low-income people of living in mixed income projects as opposed to neighborhoods finds very little advantage despite what everybody thinks. There are huge advantages to letting people live in higher income neighborhoods, but that does not mean that people get big benefits by living in mixed income projects where you've got low income people living with really high income people.
Thank you, Jess. It's 7:16 now. I'm just doing a quick time check. So I think we'll have time to take Courtney's question from the Q&A and then call on Larry Myers. So Ali, would you want to answer Courtney's question, or Caleb?
I'm not aware of any. So the question is there any effort to collect data on the experiences of tenants in affordable inclusionary units, particularly around housing stability or retention? These tenants would not typically have access to the same on-site tenancy sustaining service as in 100% affordable housing buildings. I'm not aware of any data collection on the experiences of tenants, but I think Courtney is exactly right, and it ties into what Jeff was just stating, that that affordable units in a market rate development would not have the same sort of resident services to help them remain housed or to access other programs that would be available on an affordable housing building.
Thank you. Larry? Larry Myers, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, here we go. Sorry. So I just wanted to kind of clarify what I heard from Sally, the last comment that she made. I heard it as these on-site mitigation projects are generally targeting low, not very low, but low income. But that, I'm confused by that, because that is not what the mitigation, the affordable housing impact fee in, I think it's, what is it, chapter 15.201, I think it is. It allows complete 100% waiver of the affordable housing impact fee for as little as 10% moderate income housing. And so if that's the law, I just don't understand when Sally said developers are voluntarily giving these units to lower income folks.
I think one of the reasons is because it relates to the density bonus program that goes along with it. So, you have the option of 5% very low satisfies your affordable housing impact fee requirement, or 10% low and moderate. And many projects go with the 5% very low because they get both, and both of those get density bonuses, but the 5% very low is fewer units, and it's the economics work out so that that can turn out to be more advantageous to the developer.
So
Well, I
it
would-
has to be for density bonus projects now. For that
Yeah, I would add to that. I mean, actually, and we'll have this when we put all the numbers. We've actually been seeing that developers have been doing more than the 5% very low. And a lot of that also stems to it's the concessions and the waivers and the density bonus that you get. So you actually get a higher density bonus when you're providing the very low affordable, and you also get more concessions and waivers. And the higher percentage of very low that you provide above the 5%, you get, additional concessions and waivers and additional bonuses. So we've actually been seeing that developers have been even building more than the 5% very low. And again, we don't have very many projects actually building the moderate. It's and that's because I think they just don't get as many concessions and waivers and bonuses from the density bonus projects.
Thank you.
Rick?
Rick?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Courtney's great question. I think it's really critical to think about it from the point of view of the residents, and like this question of like what is best for the residents, on-site or 100% affordable. There's this great study which I posted there under her question from Cambridge, Mass, where they really did this rigorous analysis of what do people think about their housing experience when they live in an inclusionary unit versus when they live in a 100% affordable building. It's not a simple answer. There's pros and cons, but the residents themselves articulate the pros and cons. And there's a surprising number of cons from living in the mixed income buildings. And the tenant services is one of them, but there's also a very dramatic difference in the number of what people experienced as microaggressions. Like people have a stigma that they experience in the market rate buildings. And I think it's really comes down to how the building is managed, but the buildings are not always managed in a way that's conducive to a positive experience for everybody. And, we could fix that if we're going to do a lot of on-site units, but it's not immediately obvious what's better.
Thank you, Rick. So Nishka, and then we will wrap up.
Hi, sorry, this is Till. I'm logged in under the wrong name. My name is Till Houdermans. I have a question about the density bonus. If the city of Oakland is seeing I think in the January, a new law was passed that allows for now 100% density bonus projects if, in addition to the initial 50%, one can now provide another 15% of moderate units to then have the project be twice as big. And I'm wondering if the city of Oakland is seeing applications using this new law that allows for the 100% density bonus increase. In other words, you can have twice the size of a project if you add an additional 15% moderate on top of the original 15% very low income. Are you seeing those applications coming in? Is that law being taken advantage of?
So we will have to check with our project planners who process applications to confirm if they are getting, yeah.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, with no last questions, we wanted to thank everybody for taking the time and for coming in today. So we will be posting the presentation, a PDF of the presentation, the recording on the website, a project website. And we will also be sharing out the notes and the questions and the responses provided as part of that and posted on the website. But in the meantime, if you have any questions or additional comments, you could always email me or Laura at LRAJAGOPALAN@oaklandca.gov or Laura's LKMINSKI@oaklandca.gov, and we'll respond to you. We'll take your feedback and we'll try to respond to your comments. Laura, did you want to close it out or we good?
Yeah, I wanted to thank everybody for coming tonight and giving your input and listening. And we'll be, having more information as this project moves along. So, and thank you.
Thank you.